Hello, welcome back to Whisky Wednesday. I'm Joe, and every Wednesday I do whisky video reviews. You know the drill by now. So this week, and for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be doing some quite interesting whiskies. Some whiskies you may have not heard of, and some whiskies that are quite, at the moment, quite hard to get hold of. So, the first one this week is the Tobermory 6-year-old single cask. And this is an independent bottling of Tobermory. Now, Tobermory is a single malt distillery on the Isle of Mull in Scotland. 6 years old, and the bottler, a independent bottler called Douglas Lang, and this is part of their Douglas of Drumlanrig series. They have a variety of different styles of single cask bottlings. The Douglas of Drumlanrig series are normally bottled at around 46%, as is that one. And the cool thing about independent bottling, I'll show you there, you should be able to see, you've got all the label information. So, because it's single cask, there's only 240 bottles of this ever bottled. Tells you that it is, the cask type is a sherry butt. It says distilled, tells you exactly what month and year it was distilled. Distilled July 2006 and bottled July 2012. And the great thing about independent bottlings is they're always really unique expressions of that whisky. So if you're used to drinking, say, the standard 10-year-old Tobermory, which is readily available, and you want to try more Tobermory, then the independent bottlings are a really good way to try some very interesting expressions. Now, the key thing to note about this is the colour. That's 6-year-old whisky, and it's fairly dark. Well, it's very dark for 6-year-old whisky. I'll pour some out. And that's because it's been matured in a sherry cask. And I'll do, that's okay. And sherry casks will give it a richer colour. So yeah, 6 years old, that whisky. And it's natural colouring as well. They haven't added any caramel colouring to this. And also it's unchill filtered as well. So let's give it a nose. This was around about £60. Often with independent bottlings, they're slightly more expensive than their kind of standard distillery bottling counterpart, but as I say, much more interesting expressions of a distillery. So yeah, colour is just awesome. You can see how cloudy that has a slight cloudiness on that, and that'll be the unchill filtering. Colour, don't know what to go with, just kind of like a slight amber hint to it. So let's give it a nose. Gosh, that's different. And the first thing to know as well is, when I first drank this, you see 6 years old, and you think, gosh, that's going to be, that's not going to be very full flavoured because it's only been in a cask for 6 years. But remember, it's from one cask, so it's absorbed a lot of the flavour from that one cask. So on the nose, I get, there's a lovely fruitiness, specifically strawberries, but think extra ripe strawberries, so the strawberries that are really kind of just soggy and just too ripe, but they still smell fruity. Bit of fruitiness. And remember, with Tobermory, they don't peat the whisky, in terms of they don't dry the barley with a peat fire, but the water Tobermory use is peated. So I'm getting a little bit of kind of greasiness from this, in a nice way, kind of greasy, oily. A little bit of that kind of coastal element, so a little bit of seaweed. It's quite buttery as well, kind of cooked butter. I'm going to try and warm it up a little bit. These bottles live in my kitchen, so my kitchen's, I'd say it's a kind of a normal temperature. I don't know, I keep them fairly well stored, but they can sometimes come out a little bit cold, especially as it's November as well. So slightly sandy, you get that kind of coastal note coming through, bit of rock pools, and there's also a nice kind of mincemeat note. You know, the kind of filling from mince pies, mincemeat. It's that kind of fruitiness, kind of sticky fruit. Right, let's have a taste. Really interesting nose. I defy even the top whiskey connoisseurs. I'd love them to try this and try and guess what distillery it had come from, because it'd be really hard to do. Right, let's have a try. Gosh, the palate, it's a completely different animal to the nose. The palate is really full flavoured. Pardon me, sorry, a little bit went down the wrong way. The palate's really full flavoured. That strawberry note comes back in, but quite spicy, kind of like spiced strawberries. So imagine like kind of strawberries and cloves. A bit of butterscotch sweetness, so there is that kind of vanilla sweetness in there. That's really good as well. Quite thick on the palate as well. Again, for a 6-year-old whiskey, you wouldn't necessarily think it was going to be like that, but it's thick and kind of unctuous on the palate. Let's give it another sip. Ooh, now the second try, there's a lot of saltiness that comes through. Lots of salt. Get a sense of the youthfulness now. So it's quite playful, it's quite fresh. A bit of white pepper. Maybe a slight bit of kind of harissa paste. You know, that kind of garlic, chilli, salty paste. So it's got a spiciness, but kind of a vegetal note as well. There's a lot of flavours for a 6-year-old whiskey. Let's give it a final taste for some more notes and the finish. Now there's more, tinned strawberries is something I definitely get from this. Tinned strawberries, more saltiness coming through, salty chilies, a little bit of kind of a sweet note, kind of maybe olives with the pimento, so there's a bit of sweetness, bit of vegetable note, and the finish, lots of salt and lots of spice. It's a really good little whiskey. As you can see, I've kind of got through half a bottle. Really good. And it's extremely kind of interesting whiskey as well. And who would have thought, 6 years old, bags full of flavour, very different on the nose, very contrasting on the nose to the palate. It's got to be a solid 8 out of 10. Solid 8 out of 10. The only thing that's, a little bit of a shame, it's a 6-year-old whiskey and it was like £60. But it doesn't matter. It's good tasting, interesting whiskey. Doesn't matter what the price is. So yeah, the Douglas of Drumlanrig, 6-year-old Tobermory single cask. And also another thing about independent bottlings, they often put flavour notes on as well. So if you look down here, it's just got a little bit of that sweetly spiced, warm butterscotch character, developing to an oak quality and spiced tobacco. See, my notes were slightly different from that, but it gives you an idea. That's what I really quite like about independent bottlings. So yeah, 8 out of 10. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next week for some more interesting whiskey reviews. See you guys.